ethical and legal means to do so, and we do this from public sources and subscription services that we utilize. Then we analyze that information about those prospects using some of the internal and external tools that we have, and then we need to, after we've identified them, research them, we need to determine, should they move on? Should we be referring them to a development officer or a fundraiser? Or should that be somebody that the fundraiser is talking to if it's a prospect that's already in their pipeline? And then we give the fundraisers and the end user, i.e. the decision maker, easily understood deliverables for them to use when they are talking to this prospect. So just some key terms for y'all to know that I'll be bandying about here during this talk. A constituent is an individual record in our database. It does not mean they are a alumnus or alumna of the university. For nonprofits that are not higher education, a constituent would be really anyone in the community that may not already be a part of their institution. They're not a volunteer, they're not an existing donor, they've never given to the institution, is usually what a constituent is going to make up of outside of higher ed. Prospects, like I've said already, are those individuals, corporations, or foundations that are capable of making a major gift to the institution. Every institution has a different idea of what a major gift is. Here at the University of South Carolina, the current threshold for a major gift is $25,000 and above. I do think now that we've made a $1 billion goal, that is going to change. And then, of course, our goal in prospect development is identifying the right prospect for the right project or program at the right time and asking for the right amount. So some of the key items that we're attempting to identify through our research and intelligence is the affinity, how much do they feel for the university or the programs that we have, capacity, which is their ability to make a major gift financially, their giving history, which is both internal and external, their engagement with the university, meaning do they attend events, were they active as a student, are they good friends with a higher level donor within our system, and then of course connections to our institution, were they an alumnus, are they the parent of a student, did their grandparents go here, or are they just a local community member that has attended a lot of events. So those are some of the types of things that we're looking for when we're looking at the prospects. And these are measurable data points that we are able to glean, and then we do weight them. We are in the middle of applying weightings to a lot of different data points within our database that we are going to use moving forward. This is getting into the analysis side of it. But some of these are not always easily identifiable, and they're not always going to be an exact indication that that person is going to give a gift. There's a whole lot that goes into turning somebody from a constituent to a prospect to a donor, not all of which prospect development is engaged with. That's just like with competitive intelligence in businesses. Once they've identified and answered the question and given the analysis to the decision maker then takes the ball and will either convert that customer or outrun that competition. Same thing happens here. So when we're identifying prospects, not all of them make it this easy, such as Jordan Belfort throwing cash off of his yacht. I wish it was this easy. Well, then again, I guess I don't, because then maybe I wouldn't have a job. But not all prospects make it this easy. So the first step that we have to do is identifying those prospects. So this kind of takes a little bit longer than one would think. You would think if you're able to find somebody with a lot of money that lives in the area, they'd be more than willing to give to an institution. But we need to make sure we're aware of the priorities of the institution or the nonprofit organization that we're working for. And if it's a larger organization such as ours, we need to really be aware of the priorities of the individual units. Because to be very concise in our intelligence, we don't want to just give them somebody with a high capacity and no guidelines as to where we think their money should go or where they would be most interested in making a difference. So if we're profiling someone, we want to identify those programs within our institution that we think are a good fit for them. So even, for instance, if it's somebody that graduated from our School of Business, but we are finding indications that they tend to give to the arts more than anything else, either internally or externally, along with all the other factors, we will likely suggest that somebody from our Arts and Sciences division talk to that prospect versus our School of Business. So we need to also be aware of the higher profile potential prospects from our natural pool, and of course our natural pool are our alumni constituents. They have a natural affinity, obviously, more so than somebody who did not attend our institution. We need to stay up to date on all of the changes in our community. Columbia, I'm located at the main campus in Columbia, and we don't have a lot of competition really in Columbia. There are a couple of other institutions within our city limits, but they're much, much smaller. We're considered the flagship university of the state. But if I was in a nonprofit that was environmental or healthcare oriented, I would have a whole lot more competition that I would have to be aware of, and I'd have to know who were the movers and shakers for the other organizations. That would go towards the competitive intelligence that we would be looking at. For me, I need to stay up to date on who's giving in Charleston, who's giving in Greenville, who's giving in the upstate, to the other natural, and I'm using air quotes here, natural competitors to our institution, which are other higher eds, mainly Clemson, in our community. We need to know what our other institutions are doing, like I was just saying, and who's giving to them. And then we kind of build all of these points and look at who's going to make that best prospect. Now, we do deviate a little bit from some standard business principles here. Like I said, competitive intelligence, you're often trying to answer a question about a competitor and how you can place your business entity or your organization above the next competitor down. We're often looking at more than that to help determine if they want to make a gift and where that gift may go, not necessarily if they're going to give it to someone else. So that's something to keep in mind about the difference between us and competitive intelligence. So this is an example of some of the data points that we identified on a special project. We wanted to look at student athletes and their giving histories to the university once they've left school. And with the hopes of identifying that one sport that we might be able to say, okay, this is a prospect pool that our athletics division should maybe focus on in the future. So we found overall from existing donors in our donor pool who were student athletes that the highest pool of donors actually came from those that played golf when they were here at the institution. Even though you would think naturally football and basketball and even some of our baseball players who have gone on to Major League Baseball would have higher capacity based on the types of contracts that they might get versus a golfer, the golf team actually gives more overall percentage-wise than the football and the basketball and baseball. So that was an interesting piece of intelligence that bubbled up after we really looked through the data. And the next step that we're taking on this is trying to determine which unit the golfers were students of. I'm guessing it's the School of Business. That's just my uneducated guess. But we're working at on that project right now. So then after we've decided what we want to look at, which is obviously finding prospects and kind of identifying the programs and the natural tendency of where that donor might want to go to, we have to collect our raw data. So like I said at the beginning of the webinar, our sources are both public and subscription sources. We do not find information that is private. We do not count speculative information. A lot of times we are told by development officers, well, I heard that Joe Smith is going to be a great prospect because he's going to inherit all of the land that his grandma has out in Greenville County. Well, that's all well and good, but Joe Smith hasn't actually obtained legal possession of that property, so we do not count that here in prospect development as part of his capacity. It would be nice that he does. If he does get the property, that's not to say that the property is going to be worth what it's worth today. It's not to say that he's going to be the sole owner. So there's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at that. And I've just listed here some of the sources that we use. I think most of us as librarians are familiar with LexisNexis, but LexisNexis does have a specific product for development. which gives us a lot of tax information, employment information, contact information. We use Research Point, which is a service provided by Target Analytics, which is a division of Blackbaud, which is all about fundraising, supporting fundraising. Research Point really is a interactive database. We had our database screened and had ratings and models created for that. So that's one starting point when we're looking for our prospects. RelSci is a fairly new product where it gives us connections for executives and C-level places. It was a spinoff from a corporate entity, which I don't remember exactly what it was called, but RelSci is now moving into the higher ed and the nonprofit realm to help us give those first level and second level connections. So if we see somebody that we've identified as a strong prospect, we can run them through to find out if they're connected to other names that we are aware of to hopefully get in front of them. We take here, and I'm not sure that I can say this for everybody, but here I've really pushed, since I took the role, that we use our university library, our Thomas Cooper library, with all of the databases. The university is paying for them. We know how expensive it is to get the aggregate databases. So through our intranet, we use them as well for Hoover's, Privco, corporate affiliations, and some of the other databases that are available to us. Then we use county, state, and online resources, federal sites. We are trying to move into more international research. A lot harder due to privacy laws and data protection policies in other countries, but we're trying to do more international. And then, yes, at the end of the day, we do Google, but we also use other search engines, and I, in particular, try to use DuckDuckGo whenever possible because that's not supposed to ping back based on your IP address and give you, weighted results. So let me go over one quick story for you. When we talk about ethics and guidelines, this is the APRA official statement of ethics that was revised in December of 2009. I'm not going to read these to you, but we are all aware here in my division and prospect research and development as a whole is a very ethical organization. I've been part of the national organization since I started here. Great group of people. If any of y'all are prospect researchers, you probably know what I'm talking about. But we know the code and we live the code. And a funny story here is that I won't even say what division, but there was a higher level, not a fundraiser, but a higher level executive here at the university who asked the fundraiser within their department if she could call us and find out if we could get a W-2 on one of the prospects. That would be a no-no. I wouldn't even know where to look, but beyond that, that would be unethical, and I promptly told the development officer no, and she said she completely understood but had to ask because she was going to be asked if she had followed up. So this is the code, and it is important to us, and I reiterate this to my fundraisers when they ask me to look for certain things, because it does happen occasionally that they'll ask us to find something that we either A, have no access to, or B, would never have access to. Then the next step, as everybody is aware, is we're going to analyze the data. Now, this is just an example of a spreadsheet that I was working on. I took out some of the values so you wouldn't see them, but this is actually a really small spreadsheet. I think we all know how many columns we can end up getting when we're looking at intelligence and trying to answer questions and get the most important data points to bubble up to the top. But this is actually where we, in prospect development, in my particular division, have the most fun. We love looking at the data and then coming up with the answers to some of the questions that we need to answer, which for us is what prospects should we be talking to. We mainly focus on descriptive and predictive analytics at this moment in time for us. So for us, descriptive would be how many more donors did we have on this campaign versus past campaigns? What are giving patterns for our higher level donors? Do we see that they tend to fluctuate based on the economy? Obviously, yes. There was a big dip in our annual giving, total dollars when the recession hit in 2008. But do we see that some of our higher level donors, when we're looking at cumulative giving, are giving to one particular entity, or are they spreading out their gifts over a lot of different entities within the organization? And when they are spreading the gifts out among a lot of different entities, then we have to really dive into more intelligence to figure out, well, where should we really be focusing our intentions with them at this point in time? What units did get the most monies? Some of it's surprising. Our libraries actually have some of the highest giving levels, but that's because a lot of what they accept are gifts in kind, which are great, and we do count them as gifts to the institution, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the donors to that particular unit are going to be profiling as having the highest capacity going forward. They might have inherited papers, or they might have one family member that had the funds that enabled them to purchase a collection that they then gave to the library. So those are some of the things that we have to look at and think about when we're doing this. Then the next one that we utilize the most are predictive. So what parameters are we defining a strong prospect with, and can we apply that to our entire pool of prospects? Can we apply it to a particular division? If we engage a higher capacity donor with high net worth and look at them specifically by a geographic area, how many more dollars could we potentially raise? And one of the biggest projects we're working on right now is, could student engagement correlate to higher giving dollars from prospects in the future? And for us, and I've never worked competitive intelligence in the corporate world, I was more in sales, I don't know whether you find that it crosses over a lot, so a descriptive becomes a predictive, and sometimes a predictive for us becomes a descriptive once we get the data, but we find that we cross over a lot of these quite often. So one of the ones that we're looking at right now, and this was a descriptive analysis that we did, was our VP of development wanted to know who were our $1 million donors in the campaign at that point in time, which was this past, she actually asked us to start this last December. So who were our $1 million donors, cumulative giving to the institution, and where did they give their money? And can we see a pattern where we can anticipate when it would be a good time to ask them for a gift again? And so one of our sources when we're pulling the raw data is our database, which I would love to say is a great database. It is a good database in the respect that it can hold a tremendous amount of information, but it is a poor database in the respect that we can't just pull the data out ourselves. It requires a report to be written in Crystal anytime you want to pull out information. So we rely on our information systems team to give us the reports, but they're also supporting everybody else within development and actually a lot of parts of the university. So sometimes we have to wait a long time to get the reports that we need in order to answer some of the questions that we have. Just as a sidebar, one of my research analysts is actually going to start teaching herself Crystal. We have access to Skillport, which is online tutorials, and she's going to start taking Crystal because there's some easy questions that we have that just if we could pull the data ourselves would make things a lot easier. Now, other database, or what we call constituent relationship management databases, CRMs, from other vendors, you can query the database yourself, which is one of the blackballed ones, CRM, and Razor's Edge allow you to do that. But ours is Millennium, and it doesn't let us do that. So we were looking at the 1 million or more total households giving for the descriptive. We wanted to see some of the questions I wanted to have answers besides what the VP wanted, which was, where did they give their money, and can we look at a graph and figure out if it's time to ask them for another gift again. I wanted to know what was the age. And so my analyst that pulled all the data, and she and I worked together to figure out what the questions were and how we wanted to answer it, did create the scatter plot. And you can see from here that we do have a pretty concentrated cluster of donors that are between 60 and about 85. That is not unusual. In our part of the world, the average donor is going to be more in their mid-50s and up for major gifts because they've reached that point in time in their lives that they've probably paid for their home or gotten close to paid for their home. They've reached the pinnacles of their careers, and they've gotten kids out of the house if they're lucky. So that's that's not unusual for us to see that. There were some outliers which we thought were interesting, like the person who has given cumulatively $8 million is only in their mid-60s. And then we, of course, have somebody that's given $1 million that's only around 45. So there are variations, and there's going to be, like anything, there's going to be bell curves, but you can see that we were clustered pretty closely with what's pretty well known in the organization or in our industry. So what we were able to determine from this and give this intelligence to our VP was, here's your average age. So when we're looking at donors, don't discount the bottom of the scale on the top of the scale, but we really should want to talk to individuals really in that 55 to 75 age range. They're going to have the capacity and the ability. But what's not reflected on the graph that you see here is that we were actually on several of these donors able to see a pattern of when their major gifts came in. And for instance, one of them was, you could tell about every 3 to 5 years, the person would make a very large gift. So year one, they would start off with maybe a $500,000 gift, and then for 3 or 5 years after that, they'd give $10,000 here, $5,000 there, and then all of a sudden there would be another $250,000 gift, and then they'd scale back again for another few years. So there wasn't really anything that we could determine fluctuations economy-wise or employment-wise for that person. It's just, that's kind of their internal timing. It could also be that, you know, when the development officers are talking to them, and it does take, on average, for most places, around 2 years to close a major gift. So one of the things we wanted to look at after that was there constant contact in that time frame with that prospect? So we can say, from a prospect management point of view, yes, it works. You need to keep them in your pipeline. You need to be contacting them fairly regularly over this time frame. So that's some of the information that we use from this kind of descriptive analytics that we take to leadership. But for predictive, we started with a descriptive analogy, and then we looked to find out what we could use to predict future giving. And so this has been a huge project that we took on, about a year and a half ago, that's almost finished, and that's our attributes project. So like I've already told you, our database is pretty cumbersome, holds a lot of data, hard to get it out. We have a table within the database that keeps track of all of the what we call attributes, and these are the engagement meters or data points about our constituent pool. So it's, were they athletes? Were they in student government? Were they part of a Greek organization? Were they in the choir? Were they part of a Christian organization or a religious organization when they were here that was on campus? And then after they've left, were they engaged in events? Were they on any kind of boards? Did they give money to a certain cause? You know, there's been in the past certain buckets of causes that were put into this attribute pool. So what we wanted to make sure we did first was identify all the attributes, determine the ones that were most worth our attention versus those that were one-offs, and then we wanted to determine how much weight should we give to each of these attributes so we could then turn around and run some type of modeling off of these attributes. We are still in the process of trying to get our IS team to actually put the weights into the database so they then can have reports created that will pull this stuff automatically. But in the meantime, we wanted to test our theory, and so we chose one class year from one unit within the institution, and we chose arts and sciences because that is actually our largest constituency, largest alumni basis from our arts and sciences currently. And 62 is about the right age range of people who will have been making major gifts. So we wanted to see if having this engagement as a student and or as a alumnus would affect their giving patterns. And this is the distribution about their weights of the more they were engaged, the higher total weighting they obviously had. And we actually did determine for each additional attribute that they had above 3 resulted in around $346 of additional giving per person. So we tested the model. The model was a fit. It answered the question that we had. It matched what we felt was going to be important. So the next step for us at this point in time is now to make it predictive. Let's see if it's going to predict the same amount or the same result from a different class year. So our next test is class of 62 for the School of Business. And then I want to test the class of 72 because there's a wide variation in philosophy and lifestyle from someone who graduated in 62 versus somebody that graduated in 72. But this is just an example of how we've moved from a descriptive type of information that we're now applying as predictive. And if it tests well again on another class, we're going to start applying that model to different class years from different units going forward to bubble those type of prospects up to the top. So then our last step, when we're looking at that list of the 4 pieces that are competitive intelligence versus the 4 pieces that are prospect research, is we have to communicate that intelligence. So like I already said, we are really more of the science behind fundraising. You know, we use the raw data, we use spreadsheets. And by the way, I think I didn't mention that we only use Excel spreadsheets and SPSS for all of our statistical analysis that we're doing so far. And we're using a very low version of SPSS. We're not using the newest and the best. It's not enterprise here yet. So it's desktop SPSS that we're using. And then we use a lot of free services for the next step, which is communicating the intelligence, which is a lot of data visualization. I should have written down some of our free sources that we utilize, but I failed to do that. But there's a really good one out there right now. I think it's Cool Data. No, that's a blog. But there's a couple of free sources that Google has a free mapping service that you can do heat maps, so we've used that. And then there's a couple of other services that let you put in the data points that you want and then create a lot of really cool graphs and charts. And the problem with it is it doesn't really let you download it. I have to kind of screen print it and then apply it to any prospect information that I'm giving out. But we have found that the end users, which are our development officers or our fundraisers, are really the art. You know, they're the people. They're the ones who are really good at getting in front of the donors and talking about the donors' needs and what they want to achieve and the legacies that they want to leave. Based on the information that we've given to them, they are in a better position to have those conversations. But they really often, and I'm not saying all of them, but often aren't as in tune with the data side of it. You know, recording their contacts in our database sometimes can be a little bit of an issue because that's another source of information that we use from the raw the raw data that we're collecting. But showing them spreadsheets, a lot of times the eyes kind of glaze over. So we have to make the deliverable as easy to understand and to get our point across as much as we can using data visualization. We do have prospect profiles, and I'm going to show you an example of one in a minute of what we get to them. So we really try to summarize what we find to make it easily digestible and actionable. I always tell my prospect researchers and my analysts, put on your development officer hat when you're writing your profiles or you're creating your deliverable. What do they need to have in order to get in front of that donor or that prospect? What is going to drive that conversation forward for them to get to the end goal, which is hopefully a major gift from that person at the end. So we do include summary statements, and a lot of this is directing them where they should be talking to that donor. Like I've already said, I'll give them even talking points. Ask them about their dog. You know, they are avid animal rights donors outside of the university, or I'll say, ask them about their job at XYZ. They did a lot of neat things. They had papers published. You know, we've looked all that up. There's no point in not relaying that, but if it's something that's going to start that conversation with the prospect, then we make sure that we give it to them. We give them the tag statements. You know, these are the things that we're finding on social media about this person. And again, we're using, just to backtrack, social media in ethical ways. If they haven't put their privacy on, then it's to us, it's fair game. But we never give them information about children. We don't give them information about, minor children. We don't give them any information other than it looks like their grandparents attended here, which we should have in our file anyway. And then we let them know who their gatekeepers might be, because for some of our C-level prospects, obviously they're going to have administrative assistants or executive assistants, and that's who they're probably going to have to talk to get in front of that person. So, for instance, on that previous analysis that I showed you about the attributes, we would want to make sure that they're talking to somebody who had participated in activities as a student. And tell them about that activities. They were in Glee Club, they were in a certain sorority or a certain fraternity, and they played intramural sports. So those are the type of things that help them get comfortable with that prospect, and then hopefully get them, like I said, to that final gift. So I want to show you, and I hope y'all can see this because I couldn't really make it much bigger, but this is a mock prospect profile that one of my researchers did as a joke last year and sent out, but it's a great example of what we're sending out to our donors. So we always try to include a publicly available photo, and we do cite the source of where we obtained the photo of the prospect. We will give them the ID number if it's somebody that is in our database, their full name, their status, are they alumnus, non-alumnus, parent, graduate, non-graduate. Then we talk about their education. I don't usually recommend that we go back previous to college, but sometimes if they've been at prep schools or boarding schools, we'll want to make sure we're noting that because that is an indicator as well. So we talk about their education. If they've pursued education outside of the University of South Carolina, we're listing it there. Then we talk about their work. You know, where are they currently? What's the role they have? How long have they been there? What was their previous employment? What is their career trajectory? What can we glean from their LinkedIn? Then we talk about assets. We try to list everything that we can find publicly and then give market value. If we can't give market value, we do give tax assessment value. I also always try to include if there is a narrow disparity between the property value and the mortgage value, because LexisNexis does show us mortgage documents, and of course you can find them in most counties as well. So if I find a donor that has $1 million home, but a $990,000 mortgage, I make sure I'm noting that as well, because their capacity on paper may look pretty good, but their ability may be a little bit lower than what we thought, because most people don't leverage that much when they have that much cash lying around. Then we talk about family, especially if there's any connections to the university, because like I said, that's one of the data points that we think is indicative of somebody who's going to be a strong prospect. We talk about their other philanthropy. You know, who are they giving to? How much are they giving to? Research Point has a service called NOSA that will give us a lot of giving that's outside of the institution that you're in. And then we talk about miscellaneous. You know, for Santa, he has several aliases: St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, Sinterklaas, and of course Kris Kringle. But then we talk about the things that are those little tidbits, like they like to cook, they like to golf. Things that we can find either from contact reports from previous meetings with that person, or that we're getting from looking at their profiles, reading their biographies, or reading their social media. So this is the basic way that we present the profile. We also attach other information. If we're able to find information, the connections in RELSI, we'll attach the RELSI report. Research Point, like I said, we had models, and they do wealth screenings for us in Research Point, so we'll attach them to wealth screening so they can get a real big picture in their final deliverable about this prospect and make that decision if they're going to pick up the phone and call them or not. And that is that. So Katie, you're on.
All right, thank you. That was very interesting. Much appreciated. One of the questions, just wondering, will you be making the slides available to be shared?
I think y'all, that's up to y'all. It's okay for me. Okay. So yes.
Excellent.
It's okay for me.
Okay, great. I have a question actually from myself. I was just wondering, in terms of reporting, are you reporting on sort of a scheduled basis or as requested? Like, are you continuously analyzing, or is it just a bit of both?
It's a wide variety of both. So we, in prospect research, have two basic levels that we in the industry call reactive research and proactive research. Reactive is when a fundraiser reaches out to us and they either have already identified the prospect or they've been referred to a prospect, and they want us to research to find out if that is somebody that is a good prospect. So we are only often becoming aware of that person because of a third party. Then the proactive is where we are using the data analytics like I showed you, either predictive or descriptive. We're using research points. We're using news alerts. We have a lot of news alerts. We're signed up for LexisNexis news alerts, Google alerts. We're signed up for as many free newsletters in our region that we can get, like Midlands Biz is one of them, Charleston Currents is another one, where we have this one inbox, and one of my assistants, prospect research assistants, that's her job, along with other things, is to read all of the news alerts to see who's popping up. You know, is there somebody that we should be talking to? Is there, she identified a organization, a corporation that's building a factory that's going to be completely gluten-free, but they're taking over a large space, I believe, in Orangeburg. So she did some proactive research on that corporation because, you know, we have a program here called Carolina Cooking, and our university president's wife, our first lady, is a avid promoter of healthy eating. She's written 2 cookbooks. So that was something that popped up on our radar that we felt like the president's office should be aware of, and that maybe our principal giving development officer, somebody who goes for principal gifts, which are $1 million or more, should maybe reach out to. So it's a combination of both.
That's great. The next question I have on here is, how often are you creating the profiles? Do you keep them updated, or like as people are coming for events, that kind of thing?
You know, in a perfect world, we would. We update them when we are asked to. So I know that sounds terrible, and I would love that we could do that more frequently. However, in my shop, it's myself, 2 analysts, and 1 prospect research assistant supporting. We have over 250,000 living alumni, and we have, when we're fully staffed, we have over 50 frontline fundraisers. So our ratio is one of the largest in the SEC because we compare ourselves to others in our conference. So when we're fully staffed and development is fully staffed, we have a ratio of about 1 to 16 to 1 to 20, where a lot of institutions have 1 prospect researcher for about every 5 to 10 frontline development officers. So the volume of work, especially since we were just in the midst of a $1 billion campaign, really prevented us from doing these updates. What we do, however, is we have very clearly communicated to our development officers that when they are moving that prospect through the continuum and they feel like they're getting ready to make that major ask, they're going to ask that person to come back to us, let us run their report again, make sure that nothing substantial has changed in their capacity, that they haven't made another major gift, because that would not be a good thing if they made a $1 million gift to one institution, unless they are fully engaged and have indicated that they want to make another gift to our institution. Would it really be the best time to ask? Has there been any change in their family status? For instance, just today, we were asked to do research on a prospect that had been identified for one of our satellite campuses a couple of years ago, and we had done the profile a couple of years ago. So they sent the name again, and we're like, well, we already did this. Let's just see if anything's changed. Well, what has changed is that he has become divorced in the last 2 years, and all the property was in his ex-wife's name. So on paper, he doesn't have anything anymore. Now, that could change because we don't know what the divorce decree says. They could be in the middle of changing some of the property back over to his name, but on paper, he doesn't have any capacity anymore, really. So that's something that we're going to have to let them know about. So we don't update them regularly. Also keeping in mind, for every development officer they historically here, and we are in the middle of changing some of this under the prospect management arm, but historically have been keeping 100 to 120 prospects in their portfolio at any given time. And that would have been really just time consuming for us to do updates on all of those prospects.
Great, thanks. The next question I have is, do you keep track of or have any comparative information looking at the changes in donation amounts, number of donors, and that sort of thing, compared to before some of these predictive research that you've been doing compared to after, like the impact that it's been making?
Yes, I do, but that's only been on our proactive research. I keep track on a spreadsheet, go figure. Every proactive lead that we have sent out, once we had the models done by Research Point, has gone on a spreadsheet, and I have a internal bookmark in the database to let me know anytime there's been any changes on that record. So I can see anytime that the development officer has tried to attempt to call that person, if they've had a meeting, and also if any gifts have come in. So for the proactive side of it, yes, I'm able to keep track of who's making donations. I also can pull reports, and I have pulled reports of specific donors to see has something changed since they've been in a portfolio. But what we're also doing right now, we're in the middle of here, is portfolio analysis, where we are looking at every prospect in a development officer's portfolio, looking to see their prior giving, looking to see their prior asks. Have they been asked for a gift here in the past? Did they give or did they decline? If they did give, are they giving on a pledge? So are we really in a place to ask them for a gift again? Then we make recommendations based on the internal information that we're looking at, also the external information. And we are keeping track of all of that on spreadsheets as well. Does that answer the question, I hope?
I think so, yeah. We've got another question on here. Are most of your donors former students?
Interestingly enough, for this last campaign, the majority of our donors, as an aggregate, were non-alumni.
That is interesting.
When we're looking at the dollar amount, the percentage of giving was from non-alumni.
So
and that's something that's going to be true, and it's something that I've been pushing really hard here when we're looking at our proactive pool of applicants or pool of prospects in our Research Point models. A lot of them are non-alumni, and it's something that I've been preaching, that we can't always rely on the friend of the university, which is somebody that may have attended here but doesn't have the capacity or the inclination to give, when we have somebody who did not attend the university but is strongly philanthropic to causes that we have programs for here. For instance, one of ours is Jewish Studies. There is a strong Jewish Studies program here, but there's also a strong Jewish Studies program at the College of Charleston, and a lot of the South Carolinians have been giving to the College of Charleston one because it's been around a lot longer. So I'm trying to, and have given names of non-alumni that have super strong philanthropic ties to Jewish causes outside of South Carolina for them to talk to.
So I believe this is kind of in a similar vein, but do you do foundation research, as in checking 990s that are on file with the IRS and that type of thing?
I do look at 990s for foundations through GuideStar. I don't go to the IRS. I go to guidestar.org. We don't do as much foundation research simply because they actually have a fairly decent-sized team, but they also have one of my old prospect researchers who left to go to school in London, who is working for them on a contract basis right now. So he does a lot of their research. We have in the past supported our corporation and foundation relations at a higher level, and I'm sure we'll go back to that once he's no longer supporting them remotely.
All right. So that's the end of the questions that I've got over here. I guess it's a good time, unless you have anything else you'd like to add, to wrap up a little bit early.
Nope, I don't have anything else to add. On the last slide, I have put my contact information. As of right now, I'm actually in my last week here at the University of South Carolina. I will be moving to Virginia Commonwealth University starting on October 5th. So my mailbox here will still be active for at least 2 weeks after my last date, so I can make sure I'm routing emails that come in, because I've been the contact person for so many things as far as our team is concerned. But if you need anything after October 1st, it's best to try to find me on the VCU website, vcu.edu.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, Kristin, and thank you again to Aurora WDC for sponsoring this webinar, and thank you to everyone who attended.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.